April 19, 1993. The sky over Waco, Texas wasn't just burning, it was watching. Thick black smoke twisted upward like something alive. Sirens screamed in the distance. Helicopters circled like vultures. And behind those flames were people who believed they were about to meet God. Inside the compound, children were still there. Men, women, entire families. And at the center of it all was one man, David Koresh. But here's the question no one could answer, even today. Was he a prophet? Or the most dangerous manipulator America had ever seen? Because this wasn't just a fire. This was the end of a prophecy. And Koresh had been preparing for it for years. To understand how 70-plus people walked into death willingly, you have to go back to a quiet, awkward boy no one took seriously. Before the name David Koresh meant fear, he was just Vernon Howell, born in 1959, raised in instability, rejected early. He struggled in school, couldn't focus, couldn't connect. Dyslexia made reading difficult, but oddly, one book stuck with him: the Bible. Not casually, obsessively. While other kids played outside, Vernon locked himself into scripture, memorizing verses, studying patterns, searching for meaning. This is where the psychology begins, because when someone feels rejected by the world, they often look for a world that will accept them. Vernon didn't just read the Bible, he entered it. He began to believe something radical, that he wasn't just reading God's message, he was part of it. But here's the turning point most people miss. He wasn't charismatic yet. He wasn't powerful. He was invisible. And invisible people often do one of two things: they disappear, or they reinvent themselves into someone the world can't ignore. And Vernon Howell was about to do exactly that by walking into a group already obsessed with the end of the world. In the early 1980s, Vernon found them. A small religious group living outside Waco. They called themselves the Branch Davidians. They believed the end of the world was near, that only the chosen would survive, that God was sending messages through scripture, hidden, coded, waiting to be unlocked. And Vernon? He saw opportunity. Here's the uncomfortable truth about cult psychology. It's not just about the leader, it's about the audience being ready to believe. These people were already primed. They wanted answers. They wanted certainty. They wanted someone who could explain chaos. And Vernon started doing exactly that. He studied harder than anyone else, quoted scripture with confidence, spoke with intensity. Slowly, something shifted. People began to listen, then trust, then follow. This is called authority construction in psychology. When confidence plus repetition plus belief creates perceived truth, even if it isn't real. But Vernon didn't just want influence, he wanted control, and to get it, he would challenge the very leader of the group, and win. The leader of the Branch Davidians was a woman named Lois Roden, and Vernon did something bold. He claimed God had chosen him, not her, him. At first, it sounded ridiculous, but here's how manipulation works. You don't convince everyone, you convince just enough people, and Vernon did. He gained followers inside the group, created division, turned belief into loyalty. Eventually, he took over, and that's when things changed. Drastically, he renamed himself David Koresh, a name loaded with biblical power. And then came the most disturbing part. He claimed God told him something very specific, that he alone had the right to have children with multiple women, even married women, even underage girls. Why? Because they were creating a holy bloodline. Now pause here. This is where many people ask, how did anyone believe this? The answer is uncomfortable. Because by this point, followers didn't just trust him, they needed him. He controlled information, separated members from outside influence, reinforced fear of the apocalypse, and positioned himself as the only path to salvation. This is classic dependency conditioning. break someone's connection to reality, replace it with your own. And while Koresh tightened his grip inside the compound, the outside world was starting to notice something was very wrong. Rumors spread first, then reports, then investigations. Authorities began hearing disturbing claims: illegal weapons, child abuse, brainwashing. Inside the compound, Koresh was preparing for war, not metaphorical, literal. He stockpiled weapons, trained followers, preached that a final battle between good and evil was coming. And guess what? In his mind, the U.S. government was the enemy. This is where paranoia and prophecy merged. Because Koresh didn't fear confrontation, he expected it. Even worse, he believed it would prove he was right. Psychologically, this is called confirmation bias escalation, where a person interprets any opposition as validation of their beliefs. The more pressure Koresh felt, the stronger his conviction became. And his followers? They were now fully inside his reality. A reality where death wasn't failure, it was destiny. And on one February morning in 1993, that destiny arrived at their doorstep, with guns drawn. February 28, 1993, early morning, agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms moved toward the Mount Carmel compound. Their goal seemed simple: serve a warrant, search for illegal weapons, take Koresh into custody. But nothing about this situation was simple, because inside, Koresh already knew they were coming. Reports suggest a local news crew had accidentally tipped someone off. Others believe Koresh's network of watchers had seen the agents gathering. Either way, the element of surprise was gone, and when surprise disappears, fear takes its place. As the agents approached, tension thickened the air. Then, gunfire. No one agrees who fired first. But within seconds, chaos erupted. Bullets tore through walls, glass shattered, men screamed orders. 4 federal agents were killed, 6 Branch Davidians died, and just like that, this wasn't a raid anymore. It was a siege. And while the world watched from outside, inside the compound, Koresh told his followers something chilling. This was the beginning of the end. The FBI took control. Negotiations began. The compound was surrounded. No one in, no one out. But inside Mount Carmel, something strange was happening. There was no panic, no rebellion, no attempt to escape. Instead, there was calm, because Koresh reframed the situation instantly. He told his followers, "This is exactly what God promised." Think about that. What looks like danger to outsiders looked like validation to them. This is one of the most powerful psychological traps. When belief becomes so strong, reality bends to support it. Koresh wasn't losing control, he was gaining it. Every armored vehicle outside, every loudspeaker demand, every threat from the FBI only made him more believable. And his followers, they weren't hostages, they were believers waiting for prophecy to unfold. But the real question wasn't why they stayed, it was why they refused to leave, even when they had the chance.
Get down! Stay down!
Over the next few days, something surprising happened. Some people were allowed to leave, children, a few adults. Negotiations seemed to be working, but most stayed. Why? This is where Koresh's psychological control becomes undeniable. First, isolation followers had been cut off from the outside world for years. No alternative voices, no conflicting opinions. Second, fear conditioning. Koresh had spent years warning them. The outside world was evil. corrupt, controlled by forces against God. So leaving didn't feel like escape, it felt like walking into danger. Third, identity loss. By this point, their entire identity was tied to the group. Leaving didn't just mean freedom, it meant losing purpose, community, and meaning. And, finally, Koresh himself. He wasn't just a leader, he was their interpreter of reality. Without him, nothing made sense. So they stayed, not because they couldn't leave, but because, in their minds, they shouldn't. And as days turned into weeks, the FBI realized they weren't dealing with criminals, they were dealing with belief. The siege stretched on, days turned into weeks, 51 days in total, and it became a battle of psychology, not bullets. The FBI used pressure tactics, floodlights at night, loud noises, sleep disruption, psychological warfare, designed to break them. But here's what they didn't fully understand. Pressure doesn't break belief like this, it strengthens it. Every tactic used against the Branch Davidians, Koresh flipped into proof. They're persecuting us. This is the battle of good versus evil. This is written in Scripture. Inside, Koresh continued preaching, hour after hour, day after day. He interpreted events in real time, turning chaos into narrative, fear into purpose. This is called meaning-making under stress. And Koresh mastered it. He gave suffering a reason, and when suffering has meaning, people can endure almost anything. But as patience ran out on the outside, a decision was made that would change everything and end it all. April 19, 1993, Day 51. The FBI made their move. The plan: force them out. Tear gas would be pumped into the building. Armored vehicles would break walls. The goal wasn't to kill, it was to push them out. But there was a problem, a massive one. Koresh had already told his followers the final attack would come, and when it did, they must stand firm. So when the gas started flowing, when walls began collapsing, when chaos filled the air, it didn't feel like rescue. It felt like prophecy fulfilled. Inside the compound, confusion turned to panic. And then, fire. Flames erupted in multiple places, spread rapidly, too fast, too coordinated. To this day, debate continues. Who started the fire? The government? The Davidians? Accident? Intent? But what matters most is this. Once it started, there was no stopping it. And in the final moments, as flames consumed everything, the question wasn't who was right, it was why no one escaped. The flames didn't start slowly, they erupted, almost instantly. Multiple points inside the compound ignited at once. Smoke filled the hallways, heat swallowed the rooms, visibility dropped to nothing. People inside had seconds to decide, run or stay. Some tried to escape, a few made it out, but most didn't, because inside that burning building, something stronger than fear was still in control: belief. Koresh had spent years preparing them for this exact moment. That death wasn't defeat, it was transformation. Witnesses later said some followers didn't rush to exits. They hesitated, they gathered, they stayed close to him. And in those final seconds, that hesitation became fatal. And at the center of the fire, the man who predicted the end was about to face it himself. Inside the chaos, David Koresh didn't escape. His body was later found among the dead, a gunshot wound to the head. But even that detail isn't simple. Was it suicide? Was it mercy? Was it something else entirely? No one can say with absolute certainty, but here's what matters more than how he died. It's how he lived in those final moments. Because Koresh didn't run, he didn't surrender, he stayed exactly where his followers expected him to be, at the center. This reinforced something powerful, even in death. To his followers, he didn't fail, he fulfilled the prophecy. But the most haunting part of this story isn't Koresh, it's who was left behind in that fire. Among the 70+ who died, many were children, some too young to understand what was happening, some born into the compound, some who had never experienced the outside world. They didn't choose belief, they inherited it. This is the darkest layer of the story. Because when we talk about cults, we often focus on leaders or followers, but rarely do we stop and ask, what happens to the ones who never had a choice? Reports later revealed heartbreaking details. Children found in shelters, huddled together, some likely waiting for instructions that never came, because in their world, adults had always defined reality, and in those final moments, reality collapsed. And after the fire died, a different kind of battle began, the fight over the truth. When the smoke cleared, the debates started, and they've never really stopped. Who started the fire? Some survivors claimed the government caused it. Officials argued the Davidians set it themselves. Evidence pointed in multiple directions. No single answer satisfied everyone. And that's where this story became more than a tragedy. It became a symbol, a warning about government power, a case study in failed negotiation, a reminder of how quickly situations can spiral beyond control. Even today, the Waco Siege is debated in documentaries, books, and investigations, not because people want drama, but because they want clarity, and clarity never fully came. But the most important question isn't who started the fire. It's why people stayed inside it. To understand David Koresh, you have to stop thinking in terms of crazy or evil, because that explanation is too simple, and it's wrong. What happened in Waco was built on powerful psychological forces. 1. The need for meaning. People want answers, especially in uncertain times. Koresh didn't just give answers, he gave certainty. 2. Charismatic authority. He spoke with confidence, intensity, and conviction. To followers, that didn't feel like opinion, it felt like truth. 3. Isolation. By cutting off outside voices, Koresh became the only source of reality. No comparison equals no doubt. 4. Fear plus hope combination. He created fear of the outside world and positioned himself as the only safe path. 5. Gradual commitment. No one joins a cult overnight. Small steps become big beliefs over time, and the most important one, 6. Identity fusion. Followers didn't just believe in Koresh, they became part of something bigger than themselves. Leaving didn't feel like freedom, it felt like losing everything, so they stayed, even when the building was burning. Because, in the end, the story of David Koresh isn't just about one man, it's about how belief, when left unchecked, can become stronger than reality, stronger than survival, and sometimes, even stronger than fire.